Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. My name is Grant Blackburn. I am one of the XTM experts, and today I will be hosting the webinar, which is Managing Custom Workflows. So, of course, this is hosting or managing custom workflows within XTM. A little bit of housekeeping rules for everybody. You are all on mute. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the question box. Also, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be going up onto XTM Demand later this week or the start of next week. Okay, so what we'll do is I'm going to just kick it off. First things first, so today's topics, we're going to be looking at the workflow step types. So within XTM, we have our standard and we have our additional workflow steps. So our standard workflow steps, we have 4, which is our translate, our correct, we have a review, and we have an LQA. And as we actually go through them, I'll give you a little bit of rundown how they each work. We then also offer additional types of steps. So that's like a management task or a non-cat tool process. And we also have an automatic step. We'll be looking at custom workflow steps. So how to create a custom workflow. So something that might suit internally within your business. And we'll also be looking at the definitions. So this is actually building a custom workflow step and definitions and building it into a single one. We're also going to look at creating custom workflows by target language. And this is something I quite enjoy doing because it depends on which markets you're going into. The likes is you may have different workflows for different markets. We'll also then be looking at creating a custom workflow for our non-analyzable or not supported files. So for example, files like video files or JPEGs or anything that's not analyzable. And when we create a custom workflow like this, this allows you or potentially your clients, depending on whether that's internal or external, to pass over a package. And that package can be a mixture of MP4s, JPEGs, translatable files, and it allows you as a PM to manage the whole process from end to end. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to now get into the live demo itself. One of the key things here that we're going to be talking about is when building our custom workflows and the likes of that, this does need to be done by somebody who has an administrator role. So for everybody here, if you haven't seen XTM before, I have logged in as a project manager and an administrator, but I hold multiple different roles. So this is just me over here. Administrator is my top role, but I have a project manager role, which gives me access to customers and users. I also have a linguist role, which gives me access to the tasks area. And I have a TM expert and terminologist role, which gives me access to these two, our TM and our terminology managers. So as I mentioned, with this particular one, to do any of our workflow customization, to build those workflows, it needs to be done by an administrator. Once these workflows are created, then our PMs will have access to them. So I'm coming through to is our configuration area. And within our configuration area, I'm going to come down to is the workflow. Within our workflow area here, you can see we've got workflow definitions, we've got workflow steps, and we have workflow options. We're going to be focusing on these workflow steps and workflow definitions today. The first part I'm going to start on is workflow steps. And the reason why I want to start here with workflow steps, as I mentioned when I was doing the PowerPoint, is we have 4 standard step types. We have is a translate step. So of course, this is our standard translate, which allows a linguist to do translation. It allows them to add comments. We then have a correct step. A correct step is exactly the same as a translate step. It allows editing of the translated text. It allows comments to be added, but it also tracks any changes as auto comments. So this is really, really useful if you've got somebody who's doing translation and then moves on to the correct step. And any changes they make, they're tracked as auto comments. We then have a review step. Our review step is slightly different. The review step, and this is super important, our review step does not allow editing of the translated text. So it can be seen in read-only mode, but it does allow our reviewers to add comments. So this is quite useful if, for example, you've got in-country reviewers or anybody like that, and potentially you don't want them making changes to the translation. You can use a review step, and this will just allow them to add comments. You can then, when using it further on in the workflow, you can always ask your linguist just to review certain comments. Any comments like that, they can then edit and make those changes. A lot of people do try and they occasionally get this wrong, so this is why I'm just telling you now the review. We then have the LQA step. So LQA is our linguist quality assurance. What the LQA step is, this is a combination of a correct step, but at the same time we've enabled our LQA module. Our LQA, or linguist quality assurance, allows a translation to be scored with a set criteria coming on. Now, LQA is a standalone step here, but you can also combine it into another step. And I'll talk you through that when we actually building a workflow definition and building our custom workflow. We then have is a management task. Now, a management task is quite useful if this is for PMs to set a reminder for themselves, for example, to download the target files to pass back over, or it can be anything. So a management task, we call this additional steps. We have non-cat tool processes or non-cat tool process. This is really good for things like DTP or offline or offline files or non-translatable files. So a non-cat tool process, the example I think I'm using today is DTP or desktop publishing, where we may have an InDesign file that might need to have layouts changed depending on the target language. This allows us to manage this workflow the whole way through. An automatic one, and I'm going to actually just quickly click on the automatic one. Automatic step is used in the approval of TM. This can be applied at any stage within a project. We also do have an approved TM checkbox on each steps, and I'll talk you through that as well. But why is the automatic one special? So this one gives us a wide range of options. We can decide here, approve the TM of selected segments. And this could be as, was there change target text? The status is set to done. The status is to be checked. Match type. So we can specify all of these different ones. Or if you're using XLIF, we can use the XLIF doc status. We can also update XLIF doc statuses to the minimum or all XLIF doc statuses. So depending on what you're doing, what you're using. We also have the ability here is if the action fails, so if by any chance the approved TM fails for whatever reason, we can have a choice is either move it to the next step or make it stay in the same step. So this is just giving you an idea of what all of the different types of steps we have. Now what I want to do is just show you actually a couple of steps that I've created. So for example here, something called a compliance review or a client review internal. All of these were steps that I created that were based on existing steps within XTM. So if I selected my correct one here, I can give this one, we're going to call this one compliance review 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see I've now named this particular workflow step in a certain way. This is great. This means I can make steps, create them that might fit in with the company terminology that's been used within the company or anything along those lines. This could be an easy way to do it. So by having this compliance review, you can see there, it's not happy with that name that I'm going to give it. I'll just do that. So I've now actually added it in. As soon as we do that, and we can see it hasn't been used in any number of steps, but I can also deactivate it, edit it, or delete it. And I'm going to just deactivate it. So these are some of the different steps that I've created that just help me internally with what I'm doing. Now, coming through to is our workflow definitions, because what I want to now do is talk about building a custom workflow, a workflow that can work for certain departments or certain industries. So I created a few over here. You can see I've got DTP for offline files, labeling a CMS workflow or life sciences. And I'm going to just talk these through and then I will show you how we build this. So looking at my labeling, a CMS workflow, just going to move this up and make it bigger so it's nice and visible. It's I hope it looks good for all of you. On your screens, on my screens, it looks fantastic. So I've created is the name for it, a specific name. I can also give it a description. So something that I can always look at it. Now, I've added in my steps here. So I've got my translate step. I've then got an edit step. And as you can see, that's custom. I've added in QA checks. I've then added in here is, let's just come over here, LQA or third-party review. And just come a bit further. We've got a review implementation and then an approved TM. So all of these, I can add in as many different steps as I want or as few steps as I want. To add them in or even amend it on the fly, I can just come here and I can click on the little green button, which allows me to add on a step, or I can click on the little orange button and it allows me to remove it. You will also see I've got some other options here just below. So I have is the, what we can see is just a hash symbol here. We've also got a comma or an arrow. And I'll give you a little explanation of what these are. So a comma, this means is users can access the step at the same time. So potentially I can have two steps being done simultaneously, done at the same time. An arrow, this is, well, steps can become active once the bundle is in the previous step is finished, or a hash is none of the bundles in the previous step can become active until they are all finished. And when we talk about bundles, this is where we've talked about actually breaking a large file down into separate bundles. So if I had a file of 10,000 segments, for example, and I wanted to share it amongst 5 translators, give them 2,000 segments each, I can break that down, and each one of those bundles, those 2,000 segments becomes a bundle. In this scenario then, if I have the arrow, they would be able to go from translate to edit to become active straight away. If I had the hash, all of those bundles would have to be completed in the translate step before it goes live in the edit step. We also have an option over here, percentage of whole workflow duration. This is if I'm using automatic due dates. So I can specify a due date of the 31st of May, for example, and I can always specify as, for example, a translate is always 25% of my workflow. I can then say the editing should always be 15%, QA checks another 15%, LQA, etc. We can go on. That means when I set the due date and I decide that I want to use the auto calculation of due dates, XTM will then work out that a quarter of the time for this particular project is going to take X amount of time. Of course, just please make sure that your calculation here does add to 100%. But it's quite a useful thing to use. It's quite good if you know you've always got fixed timings, or you know things take the fixed length of time. We then have an option here, approve TM. So we can approve a TM at any stage or any step within the workflow. I'm purposefully on this one, I've left it to only get approved right at the end of the approved TM. So this means, in every single step here, any TM that gets created will be marked as not approved in the TM manager until it reaches that final step in the workflow where it can then be set to be approved. The next option over here, calculates costs based on manual time. This is great for DTP because majority of the time DTP is based on time. So an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. So if I check this box within the workflow, I will then actually have is an hour or is a time box. I can then ask my vendors or internally for people to add in a time. And when I'm generating my costs for the particular project, it can be based on time. I can also decide if steps are chargeable. So if I have a workflow that's a combination of external vendors and internal reviewers, I may have internal steps as not chargeable. I can just check this box. They will not be included in any calculation. The next one I have here is my LQA. And as I mentioned, this is my LQA. We have a standalone step called LQA, and the LQA over here will just be actually included. I'm just moving this over here. It gives us an option to save the perform LQA, yes, no, or no, but show existing errors, or save results in the user's record, or don't save results in the user's record. but I can also enable LQA on any step. So I tend to do is combine my LQA with the correct step. And that is because our LQA is performed on the preceding step. So the step before. If we decide that we want to save the results in the user's record, this can be done as an internal user or an external vendor. If we are going to be we want to show it to go back and forth, we can leave the existing errors in there. So if we've had LQA performed further along in the workflow, we can still show those existing errors to anybody that they can see LQA has been performed. Okay. Calculate edit distance. This is great if you are using machine translation, potentially for post-editing. You can enable your calculate the edit distance calculation. This then allows you to generate a report, and you can actually start seeing the quality of the MT that you're getting. Is it good quality? Is it bad? Is it mediocre? Last but not least, is this was a new feature that was actually enabled. I think it was in version 12.9 that it came out. All segments must be completed to finish a task. And this one came up is that we were occasionally getting linguists that hadn't marked all segments as done. So this could lead to some issues further down the line. If this particular checkbox is enabled, the linguist cannot finish the task unless all segments are marked as green or done. So it's quite a useful one. You might only set it for 1 or 2 steps there, like the first 2 or 3 even, but it's a good one. It grays out the finish button, so we have that. So that's just showing my custom workflow. Now let's actually talk about how we're going to build one. We click on is our add option here. We can give it a name, and I'm just going to make this big again. So I'm just going to call this example for today. It's active, and the first thing I'm going to do is start selecting the type of steps that I want to do. So I want to do is a translate step. I want to add in a correct step over here, and I then want to add in an LQA step, and now I want to add in is my approved TM step. So I'm adding all of these in here. I can then, as we've discussed, all the different options we have for the bundles, if we're going to use bundles, I can use them. If I am happy with everything here, I can just hit save. As simple as that, we've created our own custom workflow definition. So this will now appear within the workflow definition. I'm just looking, mine will appear within there. So these are all the ones that I've got. So we've created it. There's our example for today. The last one I want to talk to you about is offline files or desktop publishing files. So you can see I created one called DTP for offline files. It's based on an offline step, DTP. So I can enable this. So all of these are available there. I'm now going to do is actually go back to my projects and show you how this would look like within a project. Let's go through. Now, with all of these workflow definitions and custom workflow steps that we've been talking about, we can use them within a normal project. We can adapt any of these. Now that it's been created by our administrator, myself as a PM, I can make use of it or I can edit them within the workflow. So first step, if I'm creating a project, I'm going to select as my customer. And I'm going to just talk you through. I can select my source and my target language. So we're just going to keep a basic one. And I'm going to do 2 languages, Afrikaans and German. Select my source file. We'll just add that in there. And now what we can see is I've got my main workflow. So these are some of the default ones. But you'll see where I've got my custom workflows. They all appear at the end. So transcreation, labeling, or example for today. So if we use that example for today. I can also create, and I mentioned this right at the beginning, is I can also create different workflows for different target languages. So in our scenario today, for Afrikaans, we want to use our example for today. However, for German, I actually just want to keep this very, very basic, and I want to just use as a translate one. So right now, I'm going to be running 2 different workflows for 2 different target languages. I'm also going to include here a workflow for non-analyzable files. because within my example here, I have some JPEGs or some MP4s or video files that needs to be taken. I can use the same workflow, the main workflow, or I can just use my other one called DTP for offline files. So in this scenario, what we've done is we've used a custom workflow for Afrikaans. I can use a separate, completely different workflow for German, and I've also created one for non-analyzable files. So this is showing you how we do it on project creation, but I'm going to show you what I did is I created one earlier on today. I've just got to find my webinar over here. So I created one because I've got this saved now within a project template. My different languages, so French, German, Polish, and Spanish. I have created all of my different ones. So I've got a labeling CMS workflow. If we were going to be using a pivot language, I could potentially have a new source workflow included. But for German, I'm doing life sciences. For Polish, translate and correct. All the other languages will follow our labeling CMS workflow. I've also added in my workflow for my non-analyzable files. So that's set up so that when I create the project, all of these workflows are predefined. I've also taken it a step further, is that I've also pre-assigned pretty much every single part of these workflows here. So you can see I've pre-assigned to my LSPs and everything. So that was done, and I'm going to just show you what the particular project looks like now that I created earlier on. As I mentioned, within these files, and I'll just show you the files quickly so you can see, there is a JPEG in there, or there's a couple of JPEGs, there's a docx. So how does this look? We'll go to all languages here. And you can see I get the workflow cannot be modified as the groups or files have different settings. Specifically, we've done that for a reason. I can select my workflow. Labeling CMS workflow. I'm now going to see I've got French and Spanish, and this is the particular workflow that French and Spanish will be following. Is translate, edit, QA checks, LQA or third-party review implementation, and an auto step. That's for those two languages. Our life sciences has a separate one. So for German, we've got translation, correction, LQA, compliance review, legal review, correct to QA checks, in-country review, compliance review. So once again, one project, multiple custom workflows. For all the languages, they all had offline files, so all had JPEGs with them. But this means is I can let that run separately. It's not held up. And that means myself as a PM, I can manage this from all within one area. And then just a standard translate and correct was just for Polish. But once again, and this is a key thing, is I can, as a PM, can come along here and I can actually start adding on and amending or changing any of my workflows as simply as that. So I'm just adding on a workflow now. This will allow me to do that. I can change it all, and you can just see here, translate, correct, and graphic check. So simply there, we've got that on. So that was just showing you our custom workflows. It was quite a lot to take on board, I know, and it's a lot of me doing a lot of talking. What I'm going to do is just leave now and just talk a little bit about what we've done. So we've looked at is the ability to create custom workflow steps, the ability to create custom workflow definitions, how we can create custom workflows for different target languages. All of these are possible, and all of these can be combined into a single project. We can also have the ability to have multiple workflows stored within project templates or the likes of that.